All right, it looks like we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of Project SIP's Electoral College Update. We're very happy to have you all here tonight, joined alongside Jules Cohn, Kylan Patterson, and Tyler Toller on hand. Thank you again so much for joining us. Guys, let's jump right in. Share my screen here. Okay, so we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. The way we've got the electoral map this time, we've always kind of left most of the states empty and kind of filled it in as we go. This time, we're not wasting too much time. We're jumping right in, and we're only filling in the states that are out of reach for the other side at this point. So we won't be talking about California, Alabama, Idaho, Montana, et cetera, et cetera. So in any case, let's jump right in. I'd like to go first to Jules for an update on Nevada. Jules, what do you think?
I still think Nevada's pretty much a lock for the Dems here. I don't see much movement in terms of the polls, and Nevada's been relatively safe for the most part as far as the Latino vote going blue. I don't see any real shift in Nevada. I'd say with 538 saying there's an 88% chance, with the polls saying Biden's +6, +6, +2, +5, +11, A plus poll +6. I think that's well with outside the margin of error. I think Nevada is probably pretty safe for Biden.
So for me, as I said the last time, you have to look and see when the polling data came in. So the +11 from Fox News was in the middle of last month, and as we talked about last month, that
was +6 was from last week.
No, I'm just saying that poll itself was an outlier, and it's probably half as much. And that kind of goes into the New York Times poll that you're talking about, +6, is probably closer to that. But that was at the beginning of October, right when we were still trying to figure out what was going on with COVID in the White House, and the debate had just happened. So that survey happened between October 2nd and October 6th. It might not have a clear picture or everything, because Nevada isn't being polled as often as it was in 2016 this time, because people do feel like it is a little bit more solid. But I feel like the polling for Nevada makes it a very small lean toward Biden right now.
And Tyler and Jules, just because you were on our last podcast, what was the date where we last evaluated Nevada? I think it was beginning of October, if I'm not mistaken.
It was about 2 weeks ago.
I think it was the 6th.
It was the 6th. Okay. Yeah, I mean, 538 has the chances at 85 on the 6th, and now 88. I tend to think that Nevada is one of those ones that, before the episode started, we could have put out of reach. Right now, I'm going to put it as a safe Democrat.
I wouldn't say it's solid for sure. It's nowhere close to solid. I mean, it would be lean or likely, in my opinion.
Okay.
Just because of the polling average and the fact there hasn't been that much polling, and there are still some polls that do come in at 2, and that is still close.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like we're in agreement. That's a pretty quick one. Now I want to jump to a state that has definitely changed in the last couple of years, and is looking pretty safe in one direction right now. Tyler, how are you feeling about Arizona?
I mean, Arizona is so crazy to even think that, just in non-biased forms of thinking, nobody would have thought coming into this political season, meaning 2019, that Arizona would be in play, or even kind of a landslide it's looking like. I mean, we have a lot of polling data from Arizona because people are seeing that it's going to be more of a battleground state. Obviously, we have people like Trafalgar, saying that Trump is still ahead by like 4, but there's a lot of polling coming in that's 3 and 5 points to Biden, which is amazing just in general. But again, when you look at the average polling margin of error generally being somewhere between 3 and 4%, these are not solid at all. It's totally a lean.
And it's interesting because as Robert, who was on our first electoral podcast, pointed out, Trafalgar was one of the few pollsters to actually accurately predict Hillary's quote unquote blue wall back in 2016. But that being said, by most metrics, a lot of people question how Trafalgar comes up with their results, and as a result, they're rated as a C- pollster right now through 538.
And they also don't like to talk about how they come up with their polling data.
Right.
But as I've said before in the past, this is a state that has been moving left in terms of its demographics and in terms of its election results. While a majority of the country last time moved to the right, this is one of 3 states that I could tell you moved left of everybody else. And so again, I think this is going to be a very small win for Joe Biden.
I would agree with that. I'd call it a lean blue at this point. I don't see any evidence to say that it's a toss-up necessarily. It seems a little more on the side of lean. The demographics are shifting. I think, as Tyler said, it's going to be a slight win, but I feel like Biden can take this one this year.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with that as well. And I think when we talk about Arizona as a whole, when we look at it from a holistic point of view, more importantly, when we're talking about broad-based, when we look at the Arizona Senate race between Mark Kelly and Martha McSally, 538 actually gives Mark Kelly an 80% favorability as far as taking this race. Recent polls from YouGov have him up by 11, Monmouth by 8, Siena New York Times by 11, and Suffolk +9. And so, this is a very, comfortable looking race Senate-wise. But even going down the ladder just a little bit further, there's polling indicating that Democrats have a really good opportunity to take over the Arizona State House. And so, again, down ballot is also very important when we're looking at, whether it's a blue wave or just electoral politics in general. Looking all the way through the ballot from presidential to Senate to House and, local is very important things to focus on.
To follow up on that real quick, Kylan, how is Mark Kelly looking in relation to how Joe Biden is polling in the state?
So Mark Kelly is actually running ahead of Joe Biden. Mark Kelly, from the moment that he announced, he had name recognition. Arizonans had a familiarity and an emotional bond with his wife, Gabby Giffords. We all know what happened to Gabby Giffords when she was shot at a campaign event. And so, he has a lot of name recognition, and his centrist politics and his right down the middle plays well with Arizona voters, especially those suburban voters in the Phoenix area. And so that are really powering him to this lead. It's suburban women. He's winning among older voters. So he's really building a broad-based coalition that's really, testing well for Arizona. And I think that's kind of a reason why he's outrunning Biden. Not that Biden is doing anything wrong, but Mark Kelly has a more established brand and a persona that's a better fit for Arizona's politics.
I would say for sure, Mark Kelly with an 8% lead, part of Real Clear Politics, which, they generally get most things right with their averages. And if you look at all the data that's come in just in the last week, it has him up by double digits in Arizona. So yeah, he's way ahead of Biden in terms of likability in Arizona. But if he's winning by 10 or 11 or 12, Biden just needs to ride his coattails and come in at 2 or 3. And
Yep.
It doesn't matter. It's a winner take all system with the Electoral College. So
yeah,
he just needs a win of 1.
Yeah, just win, baby.
Thanks, guys. So it sounds like we're all in agreement that we'll go with the periwinkle blue color for Arizona to indicate that it is a lean Democrat state. Can we all agree there? Or?
Say it's a lean Democratic state.
Great. I tend to agree with that. Let's move on.
That's likely. One more. There you go.
Oh, I didn't realize there was another color there, actually.
Yeah.
Because there's
So we
another one
probably need
after
to change
that
Nevada too,
for.
right?
Tilt. There's another one after that for Tilt.
I got to get used to this website, man. Good job, guys. Yeah, fantastic. Let's move on to New Mexico and talk about that one real quick. I don't think we need to spend too much time on New Mexico because the last few polls have Biden up by 15 and 14 respectively in the state. So I don't think it's at too much risk of going the other direction.
RCP has it as a lean, which in their category means it's going to be closer. I would look more at the Senate race and just make sure that Ben Ray Lujan continues his 10-point lead. Again, just like in Arizona, if he's winning by 8 or 9 or 10, Biden just needs
to ride those coattails.
He just rides the coattails of that.
And 538 has New Mexico at 97%.
In the Democrats' corner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And New Mexico has gone blue last several cycles. I don't really see it changing.
It has, but that populist message that Donald Trump does bring to the table does work in places.
Sure, yeah. But New Mexico has a huge Latino population that and Mexican immigrant population that definitely is more democratic as a whole.
I would not.
Now, Latinos aren't necessarily monolith.
That's what I was going to say.
Donald Trump has actually made a lot of inroads.
Mexican immigration.
Yeah, he's made a lot of inroads with Latino voters, and by nature, the Latino voting bloc is actually, by nature, a little bit more conservative. They feel very strongly about the right to life. They feel very strongly about individualism. So we definitely can't lump those in. And when we talk about Florida later, we actually have some numbers on the Hispanic population there as well.
So
but there's a very big difference.
There's a difference between Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Florida in terms of the Hispanic kind of population, as Kylan had said. But he is 100% correct. We cannot say that just because you have Mexican, Latino demographics does not mean that you can take that and run with that.
That's not what I was saying either. What I really meant is that the Latino vote has traditionally gone more towards the Democrats in general, and there's been a small shift in terms of Latino votes moving more towards the right, just nationwide in general. But I don't see that making, at least
That
not this cycle, I don't see that making a huge difference in terms of New Mexico.
So I would say it's likely for New Mexico.
I would too.
Yeah, I concur.
So we'll go with the slightly darker periwinkle blue for this one. Moving on to Colorado. Not only do we have a state that is trending Democrat right now, we also have a close Senate race. And I want to go to Kylan to talk about that real quick.
Definitely. I wouldn't say Colorado is as close of a Senate race, right now. Right now, starting with 538, we have John Hickenlooper favored on 538 at 83%. Most recent polls right now, Survey USA +9 for Hickenlooper, YouGov +8. And so, these polls have ranged from anywhere between 7 and has gotten as high as like 12 points for Hickenlooper. He's definitely, in my opinion, safe. I think Cory Gardner is dead man walking right now. I don't see anything that's going to turn that race. Cory Gardner is not only is he polling behind Hickenlooper considerably, his favorables are way underwater. And Coloradans they've just really soured on him. I think him being attached at the hip of the president has not played well in Colorado. And as we all know, electorally, the last few cycles, Colorado is pretty much been a blue state. Elected Jared Polis as governor. They've, the last 3 or 4 presidential cycles, they voted, blue. And so, the suburbs, in Colorado, Denver, big population center. So demographics have been trending the last few cycles for the Democrats.
Yeah, I would say Colorado is another one of those states that has started to, in the last several cycles, has started to move more towards the left in general. I don't really see Colorado moving back towards the right. It used to be a pretty solidly Republican state at one point, but now it's the demographics have changed, the public opinion has changed, and Colorado seems pretty safe.
I wouldn't say it's safe, but it's definitely a more likely state. I mean, Obama did win it twice. In 2012, he won it by 5 points. Clinton won it by 5 points. Again, as everything's moved to the right, if everything moves back to the left as it was going, then yeah, this is going to be more of a solid state. But I think it's still.
Yeah, I would still say
closer than that. It's still going to be a likely state because even at 9 or 10 points, the margin of error, it's still going to be about 4. If we put that in the worst case scenario, that means his leads are 5 and 6, which I would say would be more to the likely to lean category than to solid.
So Tyler, would you call the 5 and 6 point lead outside the margin of error?
I would say a 5 to 6 point lead would be outside of most margin of errors.
I agree.
What shade of periwinkle are we going with this time, boys?
Likely.
Likely.
I like likely.
Hey, we're all coming to agreement for everything.
I think so too.
What's going on here?
Not real.
All right, guys. What the heck is going on in Texas this election cycle? Let's talk about
Every
that.
single time we come and do a podcast, it's like Texas keeps going further.
It keeps changing its mind, man. It keeps changing its mind.
And this time, it's gone back the other direction, like we thought it would.
Yeah.
We said it each time, every single time. It was coming. The Democrats were clawing and coming back, and this time we look at it 2 weeks later, and it's definitely going more red. Which again, like we all thought it would.
So I disagree actually. So our last episode we did on the 2nd had 538's aggregate percentage at 72% in favor of Donald Trump. That number has since gone down to 67%. And the latest polling out of Data for Progress, which polled people between the 15th and the 18th of this month, has Biden up by 1 point, which I think is ludicrous to think about right now.
I have, and just in the polling data I generally look at, because I don't just look at 538. I mostly look at real clear
RCP. Yeah.
I can't speak. I'm from West Virginia. I also look at the New York Times polling data. I look at I do look at some mixes of things, and with Texas, don't get me wrong, it's not that it's not a toss-up, because in my opinion it's a toss-up, but I just, in some of the recent polling data that I've seen, I would say it's more favorable to Trump. Now, granted, 538 might be different than what I think on that, but just from things that I hear, some things that I see, and also some of the different places that I look, I would say it's definitely.
And there's no doubt that that 538 and RCP weight their polling different. But I would say it's definitely concerning for the Trump camp that 538 has this race so close as it does.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, and we're going to talk about a couple states later on when we get to some different demographics. Hey, whenever you have this state in play and it's not the double-digit win or 60-point wins, it's half of that. I mean, we got to remember in Texas, Romney won it by almost 16 points. Trump won Texas by almost over 9 points. I mean, the fact that we're talking about it even being a 1, 2, or 3 point win by Trump, or potentially even a
Ludicrous.
1 point win by Joe Biden, is huge.
Now, what I would
Absolutely
add to
huge.
that, gentlemen, is Texas, especially around Harris County with Houston and its borders, turnout is through the roof. Overall, Texas actually leads the United States in early voting thus far at over 5 million voters. That is significant. Now, if these numbers hold throughout early voting, and as we also have a higher turnout on election day, in my opinion, all bets are off. Because one thing that can throw polls into the wind is turnout. That can be a wild card. Also, when we talk about, I really didn't do too much research on the John Cornyn MJ Hagar race because I think that's been more trending red. But we do have an outlier poll that did just recently come out, and that's an outlier poll that came out for Data for Progress that has Cornyn at 44% with Hagar at 41. Again, that's an outlier poll, but it's something worth considering when we're talking about single digit small p polls when we're talking about a statewide race in the state of Texas.
And Kylan, just for our audience that may not know, who is the Democrat and who's the Republican in that race?
So John Cornyn is the incumbent Republican, part of Republican leadership. MJ Hagar is the former fighter pilot. She ran for an open house seat in Texas, and actually, I'm sorry, no, I'm confusing Amy McGrath. But yeah, MJ Hagar, fighter pilot, veteran. She's run a good campaign. She's run a very hard-working campaign. Really campaigning the right way and leaving it out on the field. But I think the dynamics of this race still hold for John Cornyn, the incumbent Republican senator.
And Kylan, one other quick follow-up question. Do we have an update on the situation with ballot drop boxes in Harris County?
So as of right now, the order has been upheld, and so they're still limited to one drop box per county. But there's also been some very dynamic things that have been going on in Texas to counteract that. There's drive-by voting where people can drop off their absentee ballots in their car and show their ID, get that scanned in, drop off their ballots. So, although I was disappointed in that ruling regarding the drop boxes, overall, I think democracy in Texas has been improved. God bless his soul, Greg Abbott. He increased early voting by an entire week. Alan West, the leader of the state Republican Party, vehemently was against that. So he went against his own state party. Again, we have, drive-by ballot boxes. So, from what I'm seeing in the state of Texas overall, I think people have had additional ways to be able to have their votes counted, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you, Kylan. Jules, Tyler, do you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say the thing about the drop-off ballots, I know that's been a point of contention for a lot of people in Texas, but it's very hard to get an absentee ballot in Texas. You have to have specific reasons, meaning you have to be on vacation or out of the state or frankly disabled. And a lot of those people would just mail those ballots back in. They wouldn't drop them off at a ballot drop-off box. So as much as the headline seems like it would catch your attention and get your emotions going, leading a narrative, it doesn't necessarily ring true for a majority of voters. I would say 90% of eligible voters does not even affect.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say the majority of voters in Texas are going to be there on election day.
They're actually voting early,
over.
which is crazy. Yeah. A lot of them are voting early.
Oh yeah, lots of early voting, but it's going to be mostly in-person voting all the way up into election day.
Fantastic. So with that said, what shade of red are we looking at, boys?
It's a lean
Republican.
I still see Texas as likely Republican, but again, based on turnout, if turnout holds as it's holding right now during the early vote, all bets are off. So I say likely Republican with an asterisk.
I mean, we're going to see some we're probably going to see some surprises on election day. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, Texas could be one of those surprises where holy shit, it goes blue. I don't know if that would be the case. That would be amazing. I think it's more likely Georgia than Texas, but but we're going to see some surprises. We don't know what election day has in store for us yet.
Kyle,
But
and
I think it
I'm gonna
has a
side with the other
chance.
two in this point and characterize Texas as lean. Oh, not that
Not that lean.
that
There
lean.
we go.
That link, yeah.
One last thing to consider, boys, as well, is when we're talking about down ballot, Democrats also have a chance in down ballot races for the first time in about over 15 years or more to retake the state house. So tons of money and organizing are being poured into Texas for down ballot races. The Lincoln Project is investing down ballot into these races because, as we all know, after 2020, when we go into 2021, we're going to be talking about redistricting. And so, a lot of these, strong gerrymanders, predominantly in the South, if Democrats can at least take over, parts of that government, whether it be the governorship or, either the state house or state senate, they can have a seat at the table, in drawing those maps and making those maps more fair and representative of their state's population.
But I also do think having close elections in Texas, a place that should not be competitive at all or anywhere close to being close, pulls money away from other places that the Republican National Convention could spend their money on. And that's as much as a lot of people want to make MJ happen, MJ's not happening.
And
It's not happening.
Neither is McGrath.
And neither is McGrath. They're not happening, but because they're making their elections close, they're pulling money to save staunch, high-level Republicans' seats, and so that will prevent the RNC from spending money in places such as Arizona that we're right now saying is lost at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A damn good point.
Right. Folks, we're moving on to Iowa, another weird one. And we have a very, in fact, I would argue the closest Senate race in the country currently resides in Iowa right now. So in addition to talking about how close the state is as far as the Electoral College is concerned, let's talk about that Senate race too. And for that, I want to go to Tyler.
So for the Senate race, we have Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield. Joni Ernst is the incumbent Republican for that state. Right now, Teresa Greenfield has been pulling very, very, very well in Iowa. And she has been doing things that mean more to Iowans than Joni has. Just recently, there was a debate that she had just this past week with Joni, and if you're in Iowa, one of the few things that's really important to Iowans is farming and prices of corn and soybeans and the sort. You would think you would want to know, especially coming from a background of farmers in your own family, what the price of corn is, what the price of soybeans are. And Teresa Greenfield answered the question, what is the price of corn? Gave a straight answer exactly with the price to the penny, and said, well, but it also can depend on a couple different factors though too, in terms of the profitability for the farmer. And then Joni Ernst comes in and talks about trade deals. Doesn't even answer the question, and then actually she didn't hear it whenever it was re-asked. It's when you don't know, it really looks bad when your opponent is prepared one way or the other. And it didn't seem like Joni was prepared for those kinds of questions. She's never had to have those questions asked of her. I think this is her first election as well. So that, like, re-election campaign, I should say. So when she did win in 2014, I'm sorry. This is her first re-election campaign, so she hasn't had that, and she wasn't expecting this a year ago, that she would have a strong candidate coming at her. So long story short, I would say Iowa is a complete toss-up again. I know when we talked about this A couple weeks ago, it was a toss-up. I would say still set as a toss-up. It's too close to call either way for me. But the Senate, I would say, is strongly leaning to the Democrats.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Before we continue, sorry to interrupt you, Jules, real quick. Before we continue, I just want to address a comment from a comment from the audience right now. Kelly Gifford in the chat says, "I doubt Arizona is going to vote blue. Also, why isn't Texas definitely red?" Who wants to take that one?
So Arizona is trending more blue than it has before. You look at past elections and how the margins have closed up. And even as I said before, the rest of the country moved further right in 2016. Arizona is still tilted a little bit more blue, going from a 15-point to a 9-point, or that was Texas, but still, it's still trended a little bit more blue. Also, the Senate races are also pulling that. Texas is not a definite red right now just because of the polling. The polling is within margins of error. The averages are within margins of error. And it's not something that we can categorically say is safe. We all, everybody that's been on this podcast, including Vlad and Robert, think that Texas is going to go red, but the margin is going to be a lot closer than it should be. And that's why we're saying it's likely. We're not even saying it's tilt or lean. We are saying lean, I'm sorry, but we're not saying that it's likely or solid because of how close the margin is going to be.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you so much for that question in the chat. We did cover that, but we wanted to cover it for you real quick, just in case you joined late in the broadcast here. Thank you.
We appreciate you watching, for sure.
For sure. Let's go back to Iowa real quick. So we covered the Senate election here. Let's move on to how we think the state is going to go, because the state is looking just as close as the Senate election, in my opinion. So who would like to take that?
Well, I guess I would agree with that, Alex. I think that Iowa is interestingly one of the biggest toss-ups right now. I can't really get a grip on Iowa because I've been watching it for a while, and there hasn't been a lot of movement either way. It's been almost 50-50. As far as polling goes, I mean, I think Trump maybe he has a slight edge on Iowa, but 538 has him 57% to win versus 43. The latest polls have Trump up 1 or even. There's one Quinnipiac, might be an outlier. Biden up 5, probably is an outlier. And then David Binder Research has Trump up 6. So we've got kind of a strange pendulum of recent polling that doesn't really seem to indicate one thing one way or the other. So I'm not really sure what to make of Iowa. I feel like Iowa is going to be really close within a few percentage points one way or the other.
I'm calling Iowa a pure toss-up. Like, I'm not marking it any way right now. It is pure toss-up. It's staying 50 shades of gray right now.
I agree with Kylan for that, because RCP has it as a 1 point to Biden, but I mean, even New York Times has it +3 for Biden, but there has been so much polling all over the place, and Iowa's one of those states that's a pure battleground state, as we've seen in every single primary. Yep. Every single primary for every single election every year. It's totally too close to call.
Just for historical reference here, Tyler, when is the last time Iowa has gone to the Democratic Party?
2012, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
2012
went to Obama by 6 points, and Obama did win it both in 2008, 2012.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think I agree with you guys. I think I still, just based on more recent polling, I still want to call it a tilt for the Republicans. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it's toss-up.
Yeah, I'm going toss-up.
I would say good toss-up.
You guys outnumber me this time. All right. We will leave that one.
Nebraska second district.
Nebraska's second district. That's right. Yep. Keep forgetting. It's always like a small little blip on the map. You can't forget that one. Tyler, how are we feeling about it?
So the second district is the most populous district of Nebraska, and generally that favors Democrats. We saw in 2016, if I remember correctly, that actually did go to Donald Trump. In this kind of election, though, this would be a place where I would definitely put it more toward Biden. Just in terms of polling, there has not been a lot of polling just in this specific district, but the polling that has been done here has definitely trended toward Democrats.
Yeah, I'm just looking right now. The most recent poll comes from FM3 Research on October 1st through the 4th, having Biden with a double-digit lead at 11 points. And then the A-rated pollster Siena College New York Times has Biden with a 7-point lead. I mean, if I'm a Democrat, I feel pretty good about that. So
I would feel good about it, but again, there hasn't been a lot of polling. That would be the thing that would scare me.
Right.
It's a Democrat.
Right. Yeah. Those rural areas typically aren't polled quite as much. So I don't want to spend too much time on this one, though. I'm willing to probably call it a lean Democrat.
I would say lean.
I also say lean.
Agreed.
There we go. Moving right along to the first of the blue wall, Minnesota.
Ooh.
Jules, what are your thoughts on Minnesota?
My thoughts on Minnesota is that it seems pretty good for Biden. I mean, Minnesota is one of those states that has traditionally kind of been a swing state. There was a recent article, I think, about Minnesota, about how it does tend to go back and forth. It's not quite as a lock one way or the other as people like to think it is. However, our polling on Minnesota, which although we haven't gotten a huge amount of really, really recent polling, the most recent one being Survey USA Morning Consult, we've got +6 and +7. It's outside of the margin of error. 538 has Minnesota as 92% for Biden. I think we're pretty cool with Minnesota. I think we could call it a likely Dem. I don't see any reason to think that Trump could really pull Minnesota out.
I tend to agree, but I'm curious to hear what Tyler's got his mouth wide open. I'm curious to see what he has to say.
I would totally say that Minnesota is not one of those states that goes back and forth for sure. It has definitely been reliably Democratic.
You know what? I was thinking of Wisconsin. That was my
Wisconsin. I can see
Wisconsin does go back and forth. Minnesota, my bad.
I was going to say
Minnesota
even in the biggest landslide election that any of us have seen in the modern era of 1984, when Ronald Reagan basically destroyed Walter Mondale. Walter Mondale only won Minnesota and DC.
Wasn't there
you were right. I missed it. I was thinking of Wisconsin. That was my bad.
Wasn't there a famous Ronald Reagan quote where he was asked like what he wanted for Christmas, and he came out and said, "Well, Minnesota would have been nice."
Yeah, Minnesota would have been nice.
Yeah.
But I was going to say the last time that Minnesota went to a Democrat was in 1972.
Went to a Republican?
To a Republican.
Or to a Republican, sorry.
Yeah.
Did not go to a Democrat, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you all know who won that election, right? So
that was Nixon, yeah.
That was Nixon. So, I mean, even Hillary Clinton, again, when everything went right, Hillary Clinton still won Minnesota by 1.5 points. I do think that it's going to be a lot closer than we all think it will be in terms of the margin of vote. Because there's some people that say it's going to be a 10% win. I think right now, Yeah, 538 has it on almost a 10% win. I do think it's going to be probably more in the 5 to 6 range.
Just to map that out real quick. Yeah, it has 53.5% of the popular vote to Biden and 44.9% of the popular vote for Trump. That's the current margin they have it at, which is actually the biggest margin that Biden has had this entire election cycle. So
It's true. I just don't feel like it's going to be that large of a win. I would love it to be that more large of a win. I think everybody would hope to think that everything is perfect, and it's definitely going to be like that. But I don't think it's going to be a 9 to 10 point win. It's going to be more like a 5 to 6.
I agree. That said, I'm still putting it in the likely Democratic category.
I agree with likely.
Yeah,
I agree with
Yeah.
likely.
I'd
Yeah,
say it's
likely.
likely.
there it is. Okay, now for the state that Jules just confused with Minnesota with. Let's move on to Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is a state that has gone back and forth in the past.
There it
So
is.
I would say Wisconsin is closer than any of those Midwest states. It's probably going to be. It looks pretty decent for Biden at this point. I would say it's going to be a narrower victory for Biden than either Minnesota or Michigan. But Wisconsin, I think, is probably going to be blue this year as well.
So Wisconsin, in that same time frame that Minnesota did not go to a Republican candidate, outside of 2016, it has only gone to a Republican twice, and that was both Reagan elections. I would definitely say that, again, this is one of those that's in a bluer wall. I would definitely say that this is going to be a very close race. And of the states in the blue wall, I would say this would be the most tilted to the Republicans than any of the other 4 states.
I agree with that.
So I would definitely say that this is a tilt state, in my opinion.
Kylan?
I'm actually gonna go more lean Republican for Wisconsin. The polling has been very, very consistent and over the last month with Biden, cumulatively having over a 5-point lead in Wisconsin. I think right now you also have to consider Trump's job approval for COVID. Right now, Wisconsin is the epicenter of a COVID second wave right now. Their hospitalization rates are way up. There's some hospitals that are nearing capacity, and I just think that's going to be held against the president. I think the polls have been very, very consistent recently. I definitely still think that nothing is in the bag, but I think far as fundamentally, I think the race is more fundamentally solid towards Biden. So I feel comfortable saying that this is more of a lean Democrat than a tilt. I don't quite see it as likely, but I do see it more strongly leaning because it's been trending very consistently in that direction.
I would say lean.
I tend to agree with the lean characterization. I think, as Kylan said, I think the polling is a little bit too consistent to call it a tilt state necessarily. And we haven't even seen anything recently come out that would indicate this is a little bit closer. Even Trafalgar Group has Biden ahead.
I won.
Okay, still a lead. And Trafalgar tends to favor the Republicans quite a bit more. So I'd like to give it the same designation as
Arizona.
It's tilt. The lean.
You don't want to do the.
I'll give you lean. Okay, I'll give you lean.
The light periwinkle blue, I think, is
What
Wisconsin gets this time around. So, moving on to Michigan. Let's talk about Michigan. Personally, I think Michigan is a little bit safer than Wisconsin, but not as safe as Minnesota. What do you guys think?
I agree with that.
I would like to start off with the Michigan Senate race. When we're talking about trying to take over the Senate, there's a very interesting race between John James and the incumbent Gary Peters. Gary Peters, he's run a somewhat ho-hum campaign. He's kind of a ho-hum candidate. Like, if you really think about it, nobody really, on a national level knows who the hell Gary Peters is. but he did make national headlines for being the first United States senator to actually come out and share his family's experience, when it comes to abortion, which I thought was very powerful. And John James didn't do himself any favors when he clung to the abolish and dismantle Obamacare line, and then when doing an interview on TV, when asked what he plans to do to replace that, he pulled a Joni Ernst and he froze. He actually couldn't even give an answer. He literally just smiled and stuttered and couldn't even come up with words. So there is one poll that I think is more of an outlier that has John James within one, and that's actually an A+ poll, the CNN New York Times poll. But when you look at Marist has Peters +5, Emerson +10, and 538 has Peters with a 79% percent chance of retaining that seat. And so I think fundamentally, I think this is when it's going to be reversed, where Gary Peters can actually ride Joe Biden's coattails to victory.
And I would definitely agree with Kylan on that one, because this has gotten a lot closer than definitely any Democrat would ever think of. And Gary Peters isn't doing himself any favors. He won the seat in 2014, I'm sorry, by 14 points. He should not have an issue winning this seat. And he is having issues, and it's because of the candidate that he is. He's not a hugely strong candidate for what Michigan wants right now. But he's doing just enough. And if Joe Biden wins Michigan, he's definitely going to win his Senate seat. He's definitely going to win re-election, but it's going to be a lot closer than it should have been, for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, he has not been strong enough to really be the candidate that, as Tyler said, Michigan deserves, really. But yeah, I think Biden right now has a pretty strong lead in Michigan. I think the down ballot voting will probably throw Peters in. Yeah, I don't see really a problem as far as that seat goes. So I think we have a pretty strong polling in both the Senate and in terms of the presidential race that will have a pretty much blue Michigan.
Now, the advantages that John James has is that he's younger.
Mhm.
Again, this is talking about candidates for Michigan. He is younger. He's a millennial. He has military experience. He's African American. He's checking all the boxes for the kind of candidate that Michigan wants. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why he is literally, actually, in my opinion, one of the best Republican candidates nationally out for Senate this year. The Republicans chose the perfect candidate for this election, for this Senate race. And it showed.
You're talking about James?
John James.
Okay, you said Peters, sorry.
I'm sorry. I meant John James. John James is the perfect candidate for this race. And he's actually, if the Republicans could duplicate this in other states that Trump had won in 2016, they would be faring a lot better to retain the Senate, in my opinion. But just the states that we have mentioned, Arizona, Iowa, now we're talking about Michigan. If they lose this one and potentially one more, if Joe Biden wins, they've lost any kind of majority that they could have had.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. We need to move on off this state right now, but I'm sorry.
Likely for Michigan.
Likely.
There we go. That you guys answered my question before I asked it.
You can feel the question coming.
I knew you can always feel it's very consistent with me. So let's move on. I don't want to do Ohio next. Let's go to Florida.
Ooh.
This is another.
Wait,
another big one.
You go for one crazy to another crazy? What?
There it is. There it is. How are we feeling about Florida? Jules, let's start off with you.
Ooh, I'm feeling optimistic about Florida. I'm not feeling 100% confident about Florida. Um, Florida has some interesting demographics going on with uh, the Cuban Americans who lean more Republican, to the South American Latinos who lean somewhat more Democratic. Um, so you've got your Miami-Dade counties, which are probably more of a lock for the Democrats, but there's a lot of back and forth going on, and Florida's so traditionally a swing state. Um, Recently, we've seen some mostly polls in Biden's favor, but not polls that are breaking in Biden's favor in a major way. So this is a state that I think Trump would have a chance to win. I think it's a state that, as a Democrat, I'm actually one of the most worried about. I think it's maybe right now ours to lose, but we definitely need to put as much effort into Florida as possible. So Florida is polling in the most recent polls, +2 Biden, +2 Biden, even, as much as +3, but and then we have a couple that are +5, +6 that are from the earlier in this month. Again, those fall within the margin of error that I'm concerned about. That I think it's going to be a really close race.
And this is,
And
sorry, just to interject real quick. I agree with everything you just said, actually. And this is kind of where I start to distrust 538 a little bit, because 538 currently has Florida at a 71% chance of victory for Joe Biden, when the last couple of polls, as you said, have been 2, 2, even 3. And our old friend Trafalgar Group has Trump with a 2-point lead. So,
right. And so I don't know that that's necessarily something to worry about, because they go off of a culmination of polling and in terms of voting history. And we've also got evidence that says that elderly seniors are voting more towards Biden this year than they are towards Trump, which is outside of the tradition, but it bodes well. And I think that's maybe why they have that skewed that way, because of that specific polling. I don't know. I'm concerned about Florida.
So-
is really where I'm standing.
So I would say that there's no reason to be concerned, because Joe Biden doesn't need Florida one way or the other.
He doesn't need Florida, but I'd
doesn't
like
matter.
him to get Florida.
It would be
because
awesome.
it
It would be
gives
awesome.
Trump a bigger window for an electoral win if he wins Florida. So I'd like a lock on Florida.
Which,
but
yeah,
I'm not seeing it.
Which is what happened in 2016. That's when Florida went, because Florida was one of the first to be called for Donald Trump out of the battleground states, and that was the beginning of what people were seeing as the end. I get that. The way that this election set up, it doesn't need to be going down to Florida or even worried about Florida. But yeah, thank God, because we all know how Florida's been the last 4 election cycles. I would say some of the reasons why 538 has and I hate defending them, but in terms of defending 538, one of the reasons why they have it at a higher rate than they should is because there has been a lot of polling done in Florida. Unlike states like Nevada that we were talking about earlier, where they had 4 or 5 polls in the last month even, we have 4 or 5 polls every other day for Florida. There's a lot of polls, and they all have Joe Biden at a couple point wins. And that's the reason why Florida is going to be a 50-50 state no matter what. It's just a matter of which way the 50 goes. And places like the New York Times has Biden up by 4. But if the polls were as wrong as they were in 2016, he would win by 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter. He's going, based on the polling data that 538 is getting, based on their model, based on historical facts with Florida, they have him at a bigger win. I do think it's a tilt Democratic state, in that this, if it's won by Joe Biden, will be won by a point. If it's won by Donald Trump, it will be won by a point. It's how Florida has always been. Donald Trump won it by a point. Obama won it by a point. It's going to be within a point.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Do you? So I got one quick thought I want to add. As Florida was the COVID hotspot of the United States for such a long period of time, do you think Trump's handling of COVID plays a part in where the polls stand right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is, Tyler and Jules brought up very good points. Ultimately, I think that regardless of everything that's happening, Florida is going to be, for me, still the ultimate toss-up. It's going to be 50-50. You can flip a coin. The only thing is the dynamics of that toss-up have changed, because normally you would think it's a toss-up that the Republican is going to have the older vote, the Democrat's going to have the votes in Orlando, Miami, in the big cities. But what's happening now is things are kind of tilting a little bit and changing up. You have, Trump starting to bleed some of that older vote population. But then you have Biden starting to bleed a little bit of the Hispanic vote. And so, but they both, balance each other out. But the same dynamics that I mentioned in Texas, I'm also going to mention in Florida, and that's turnout. As most states that are having early voting or turnout, Florida is on, Florida had just set a record for the largest turnout for the first day today of early voting. I think turnout records overall are going to be shattered in the state of Florida. And again, with turnout comes surprises that Jules loves. There can be plenty of room for surprises when you have turnout models that are beyond the scope of the polling. And I think that's going to be the case in Florida. And so, I'm still going to call it a toss-up, but I think there's strong fundamentals for Joe Biden that are actually not causes for concern, but are actually causes to be enthused about. And then when you break it down even further, you have $100 million investment by Michael Bloomberg. I also don't think that the polling has accounted for the 67,000 reenfranchised voters that were reenfranchised that were former felons. Now, granted, 1.2 were actually eligible to vote. I don't like what the state of Florida has done from their politics to keep them from voting. But at the same time, 67,000 people being registered to vote, and let's just say on average, let's say 6 out of 10 go to the Democrat. That's still, that still can decide a race. Florida has been decided by damn near less. And so, when you're dealing with the ultimate swing state, every vote does count, every advantage does count. And so, I see it as a toss-up, but with strong fundamentals for the Democrat, Joe Biden.
Thank you, Kylan. All right. How do you guys feel? Let's vote this out. Do we think tilt Democrat, tilt Republican, or toss-up?
Say tilt Democrat. Yep.
Pure toss-up for me.
Tyler?
I say tilt Democrat.
I tend to agree. I'm going tilt Democrat in this one.
Yeah. So first,
I am in no way unhappy with being outvoted on this, just so you know.
I didn't think so.
3-1.
This is the state that so far that we've gone through that would put Joe Biden over 270.
And
Right.
we're gonna get the results election night
On Florida, yes.
in Florida
We're gonna get
and Ohio.
we're gonna get a lot of election results. I would say in Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan and Wisconsin would be the two that we're probably not going to get, but
And
Minnesota we're
Pennsylvania.
going to get.
And Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania we're getting too.
We'll get there. Yeah.
So we'll get Pennsylvania. Okay.
So we're
Thank you.
moving on. And this is probably the surprise of the election so far. And I don't think anyone expected, except for Vlad apparently, and he'll brag to the end of the earth about this one. But Vlad apparently thought Georgia was going to be a lot closer, and he was right. Georgia is now a very, very close race. And for more on that, I'd like to go to Kylan. Kylan, why is Georgia tightened up so much?
So Georgia is almost like a perfect storm of factors that are going on right now. You have a special election for one of the Senate seats, between John Ossoff. I'm not sorry, not John Ossoff, but Raphael Warnock between John Ossoff. I'm not sorry, not John Ossoff, but Raphael Warnock. Yeah, Raphael Warnock and at owner of the Atlanta Dream, Kelly Loeffler. And you also have a very a good competitive seat between John Ossoff and David Perdue. On top of that, demographics and enthusiasm have been trending on the Democrat side since Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial election in 2018. We can discuss a myriad of reasons why Stacey Abrams didn't pull that race out. But what we can say unequivocally is that enthusiasm for Stacey Abrams in 2018 was through the roof, and that enthusiasm has been cultivated and has never stopped since then. Democrats have done a good job investing in Georgia, in a robust get out the vote operation, in robust advertising, and that's carried over. The Atlanta suburbs are really trending towards Biden. They're turning out strongly in early voting right now, also in absentee voting. And so, in all honesty, that's making it tight. It's just really strong fundamentals. Not like Florida, but very similar to Florida as far as the demographics and the age groups, because you're also showing when you dig in the polls for Georgia, you're finding Biden doing better with white suburban women. You're finding Biden doing better with older voters. These are constituencies that typically you would say would be strong points for the Republican. And when you have the Republican, the incumbent president bleeding support from those key demographics, they have to go somewhere, and they're going towards Joe Biden. And I think that's what's leading to a lot of strength in Georgia. And again, when you have two Senate seats that are in competition and actually have a chance to win both, that also is driving up enthusiasm. I cannot state enough the difference having two open Senate seats that's doing for enthusiasm.
Thank you, Kylan. Tyler, what are your thoughts on Georgia?
Here we are, almost in November, thinking that Georgia could go Democratic. Remember how I was saying with Arizona, this is one of 2 or 3 states that I would say went bluer than the rest of the country, because the rest of the country shifted red. This is one of those states. Georgia was won by Romney by almost 9 points in 2012. And in 2016, it was only won by Donald Trump by just over 5 points. So Georgia has not been won since, if I remember correctly, it was one of Clinton's campaigns. Yeah, it was 1982, if I remember correctly. And that's basically a generation of voters in Georgia that are used to being represented by Republicans. 2018 was one of the few times where Democrats thought that they could take the state via their gubernatorial election. That re-energized Democrats to know that they could win statewide races, as Kylan had kind of mentioned before. I don't think the demographics for Georgia necessarily have changed too drastically, but in Atlanta, those suburbs are making a difference for Joe Biden, for sure. The suburbs of Savannah, the suburbs of Columbus and Athens are mostly college towns, so getting out the votes there, those are making the difference more than the rest of Georgia right now, and it will be within a few thousand votes either way. And
Wow.
I would say it's a toss-up. I do think that Perdue is going to win the regular election against John Ossoff, but the special election will definitely go to a runoff, and that runoff will be whoever has the name recognition that gets there.
Now the latest Quinnipiac poll, in that race has Ossoff up by 6. I'm also interested into seeing if Purdue's going to get punished any, or maybe lose a point or two, for how he intentionally, mispronounced, and dog whistled Kamala Harris's name. So I would love to see one more poll come out before the election and see if that hurt him at all, or at least drives up more enthusiasm with the black vote because, just for that just being tasteless, but I do wonder if that's going to have an effect on that race.
I do see that as more of an outlier just because there's an
Yeah.
Emerson College poll that came out right after that has Purdue up by 2 points.
In this for a Senate election is polled very well.
Mhm.
And the polling has been Purdue a couple points up. And so that's why I would say he would win that. In terms of him saying what he said at his campaign rally, I would say that's not going to make any difference. I mean, Donald Trump has proved that, and we're going to talk about another candidate that I don't think it will make a difference either.
All right. Anything else we want to say about Georgia before we vote on how we think that one's going to go?
It's a total toss-up. There's no way anybody could know what's going to happen in this fucking election.
Are we all
It's
four of us?
completely toss-up.
Sorry. Are we all four of us for toss-up?
Yes.
In a heartbeat.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave it. I never thought I'd say that, but let's leave it there.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Or have a Republican senator on his best day only being up 2 points
In
Sure.
Georgia.
in Georgia.
In Georgia.
For God's sakes.
Georgia's been starting to trend blue for a little while now. If you look at the polling for the last several elections, and you can see it. It's been happening. It's been happening slowly, but it's interesting.
And now that I think of it, I kind of almost myself, I just have a feeling like I want to put it at tilt Republican, but I'll leave it with the majority vote here, and we'll leave it at a toss-up for now. Moving on to South Carolina. There's this interesting Senate race I want to get into there, but first, how do you guys think South Carolina is going to go as a state?
It's going to go to Trump. It is, I
Likely
would say, it's likely a Trump state. Although, this is the fun part about South Carolina. Let me pull this one up. So South Carolina, right now, like let's say with New York Times, is +8, which sounds like a great poll for Donald Trump, and that he has a larger lead. That is somewhere between 6 and 10 points, depending on the poll, less than his lead in 2016 was. It shouldn't be as close. I mean, that's an 8 points is not close.
Yeah.
Single digits is, I mean, high single digits is not that close, but this should be a double-digit win, landslide win for the Republicans. And since you brought it up, Alex, the Senate race there between Lindsey Graham and Jamie Harrison, that, I mean, for obviously me and Kylan, African Americans, we look at this as, wow, we can win in the South, or at least build competitive races in the South. Stacey Abrams, as we mentioned with Georgia just a couple minutes ago, shows that we can do that. In Mississippi, we have Mike Epstein.
And the Lincoln Project just jumped in to provide some air cover for Espy. So they must see something.
It would be really crazy to think that Mississippi could elect a Black Democratic senator. South Carolina could elect a Black Democratic senator. It's mind-blowing to me to even be in this position. But as we talked about with Peters and James in Michigan, Jamie Harrison is the perfect candidate against Lindsey Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it certainly seems that Lindsey Graham has been having a little bit of trouble with fundraising recently. He's gone on many of the major networks, asking for money, plugging his website and stuff like that. And realistically, I mean, according to these polling models, the race has tightened up since the beginning of October. I still think personally that it's probably likely going to remain in Lindsey Graham's hands, but yeah, I mean, it speaks to what you said earlier. The fact that somebody can make a Republican Senate race in South Carolina this close just speaks volumes. Really does.
I would agree that I wouldn't say likely. I would say more leans Lindsey Graham. Again, because number one, Jamie Harrison has run a damn good campaign. Like Tyler said, he's been the perfect candidate. He's had tremendous fundraising, broken Democratic fundraising records. He's run a picture perfect campaign. He debated Lindsey Graham very well, both times in the second, quasi debate, the Lindsey Graham, you can go anywhere you want in South Carolina as long as you're conservative. That was a foot in the mouth moment. I don't think it's going to impact him too much, but it's still a foot in the mouth moment. But I still think the ultimate wild card, as in most of a majority of the country, turnout is approaching records in South Carolina. Who knows what can happen on election day or as we go through early voting if turnout models are above the methodology for some of these polls. And so, although I still think it's going to be a lean Lindsey Graham, this could also be another surprise. This could literally be another surprise. And the fact that we're sitting here saying that there's even a path for a Democratic senator in South Carolina just shows, that the nature of things are changing. Maybe that's just because Trump is such an unpopular, polarizing, divisive figure. Or to Jules's point, maybe this could just be a new South. Maybe things are trending slowly but surely, towards being more competitive. Time will tell. But I think this can be a learning lesson for Democrats. You know what? No matter what, field good candidates, run good candidates, and actually run a damn campaign and compete to try and win. As Herman Edwards said, you play to win the game.
So like there was a candidate in Arkansas, a Democratic candidate that was going against Tom Cotton in Arkansas. What he wasn't a very good candidate, frankly, in my opinion, but he was still running. But then he dropped out before the Democratic Party in Arkansas could put another candidate in. So Tom Cotton's running unopposed in Arkansas. And he is somebody that I wish, not I wish, but if I was a Democratic, if I was in the DNC, I wish that there was a candidate that would be running against him in these kind of election climates. Yep. Because you would force him to spend a bunch of money, you would gain a bunch of money because you have even the slightest prospect of winning that race.
Yeah, I think in many ways, the United States in general is starting to move in terms of a generational shift more to the left. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of this in campaigns like this.
I would disagree.
Yeah, okay, well, can I complete my point?
No, go ahead.
Well, I think we're seeing it, though, in terms of polls like this. We're seeing it in terms of Lindsey Graham only being favored by a small amount. We're seeing it in terms of polls by Harrison up by 2, Harrison up by 1, where there's a couple polls have Graham up by 6, but for the most part, it's within a couple points. So I see those as outliers. I also see generational gaps in terms of the youth from my generation, the millennials and the generations behind me being more politically motivated and generally more liberal. And I think we're starting to see a gradual shift towards the left in general. But I'm interested, Tyler, why you would disagree.
I do agree that millennials and Generation Z that's starting to be able to vote, Generation Z, this is going to be one of their first presidential elections that they'll be able to vote in. They have a small electorate, but I would say both generations are more politically involved than prior generations before, Gen X especially. But I don't think it's breaking more toward Democrats than it is Republicans. I would say for millennials, it's in the middle, and because millennials are a lot more independent than you might think in their thinking. Even though on the coast you would say that millennials are 100% staunchly blue. In terms of the extremes, yes, they're more staunchly blue. But a millennial in Kansas is going to be more staunchly Republican than anything. And those in the middle, they're not enthusiastic one way or the other, but they are going to be able to, they are still doing their civil right in voting, but they're not excited about one way or the other. Generation Z, I would say, is leaning more conservative, at least in terms of their politics and their policy, maybe not socially, but definitely in terms of their political aspirations. I would say they're going more conservative than Democratic.
Guys, we gotta. I'll
Can I make a quick point? 30
go ahead.
seconds.
Go ahead.
So I'm gonna agree more with Jules on this one, but not that the country is moving left per se, as far as left towards Democrat, but I think the country is moving left towards policy. The country, when you talk about the country as a whole, the country overwhelmingly wants the minimum wage raised to $50 an hour, cuts across all lines. The country overwhelmingly wants the rich and the corporations to pay their fair share. That cuts across party lines. The country as a whole wants the Affordable Care Act to not be overturned and for it to be expanded and improved, and they feel strongly about healthcare. That cuts across all lines. So these are policies that are all espoused by Democrats. Now, a lot of parts of the country don't like Democrats because the brand is damaged, but the policies aren't. And which goes to the broader point of, if we actually start running good candidates and competing across all of the country, including the South, and not pissing off people by being pretentious and calling people dumb all the time and talking down to people, and actually trying to build and forge a relationship, you know, if Democrats need to be more like Joe Biden. They need to be more like Joe Biden as far as the approach to people, but have progressive policies. The country as a whole likes progressive policies. We just need the right salesperson to sell it, and get people to like us.
I wouldn't say that Joe Biden doesn't have progressive policies. Actually, I would say his policies are some of the most progressive.
All right, hey guys,
FDR.
I'm gonna stop
let's
right here. We're getting
move
off topic here. We need to move on. I wanna jump real quickly to Maine next before we get to one of the closer states here. And the reason I want to do that is because Maine by itself is not going to be a competitive state necessarily, at least not statewide. The second district is a little bit closer, but mainly I want to talk about a very close Senate race that's going on in Maine right now. Tyler, can you tell me a little bit about that Senate race?
So that's the one between Susan Collins and Sarah Gideon. Quickly, Susan Collins, I think, lost that seat with the Kavanaugh vote. She lost that seat with the way in which she voted. It's not that she voted for Kavanaugh. It's just that she has been so staunchly against some of Trump's policy, but she votes for them anyway. And this is one of those times that she did that. Sarah Gideon's running a great campaign up there. She is polling above the margins of error consistently. There's a couple that are a little bit closer, but those are small sample sizes. I say Sarah Gideon wins that seat 5 points.
So to follow up on that, do you think that Susan Collins saying she would not vote yes on Amy Coney Barrett, do you think that helps her chances at all in this race?
I think in her state, it would help her, just because it is a Democratic leaning state. But the thing that I would say that would hurt her is the goodwill has already been lost. And even if she does say that she's not going to vote for what will be Justice Barrett, she's already lost faith in her electorate.
Yep.
Thank you. You're nodding your head, Kyle, and I assume you agree with that.
I literally have nothing to add. Tyler was like so spot on, like just yeah.
Jules, what about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think she's lost the faith of her electorate. I think Maine is generally more left leaning. They really wanted. She's been always kind of moderate, and there was a big push, a big phone call push when Kavanaugh was up to like say, please don't vote for him. We really don't like him. You're our elected official. We don't want this, and she did it anyway. I think she's toast. I mean, ultimately, I think she's toast.
Yeah, I think we can all agree there.
The
Now,
second district, I would say, is a toss-up.
I was about to get into that actually. The second district is the closest thing about Maine as far as election day goes. Tyler, where you think it's a toss-up right now, or?
I do think it's a toss-up with Maine, with the second district. I mean, Joe Biden's going to win Maine by like double digits. Even in 2016, like I said, everything headed red. Hillary Clinton still won the state by 3 points. Obviously, she lost the second district in that matter. There hasn't been a lot of polling for the second district specifically, but that is a more rural, more conservative-leaning area of Maine. And since Maine is splitting up their electoral votes the way that they are, it's going to be very hard to determine unless there's some actual hard polling data.
And to reiterate to our audience, I think we bring this up every time, but I just wanted to go over it one last time. So Nebraska and Maine are the two states in the country that split electoral votes based on districts, just so you know. So that's the reason we've been doing them individually here. And go ahead and continue your point, Tyler.
So right now, the most accurate polling out there is from the New York Times. It has Biden up by 5 points in that district, but it was a poll ran in September. And if their poll is as wrong as it was in 2016, Donald Trump wins that one by 6 or 7 points. So again, it's a complete toss-up because we don't know. And I would rather say it's a toss-up than say I know one way or the other.
Yeah.
One electoral point anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As of right now, 538 grades it as a 52% chance of victory for Joe Biden, and the popular vote has Joe Biden leading by 0.4 percentage points. So that should give you some idea. Give you some idea of how close this one's going to be. So I'm very comfortable leaving it in the toss-up category as of right now. So,
I mean, ultimately, it's not going to be a big turning point of anything. It's one electoral vote.
Yeah. Yep. Moving right along.
I think you have Maine, the state, as a toss-up, and the district is Democrat.
No,
that's all right.
I tried to do it. It looks weird the way it is right now.
Right.
But
right.
I promise it's correct. Yeah.
The second district basically takes up most of the state. The first district is right along the coast.
Yeah, the second district of Maine is all rural. It's a huge swath of area, but it has a very low population.
Portland, so Bangor, all that stuff is right
coastline.
Yeah.
All those names, Bangor.
Bangor.
We got 3 more states to go through tonight. We got North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. I want to go to North Carolina first because we have another Senate election to discuss there. And with that Senate election, I want to go over that first. We'll talk about the state afterwards. But to go over the Senate election, I want to go to Kylan for that.
So this is a very intriguing race between the incumbent Republican Thom Tillis, former state Speaker of the House, and his Democratic opponent, veteran Cal Cunningham. We all thought that the race was going to be upended with the sexting scandal. For those of our viewers who don't know, Cal Cunningham had a little bit of a tiff where he got busted sending some explicit messaging to someone who was not his wife.
Although, Kylan, I want to say the text messages were pitiful, and he needs some game.
He does need game.
Is this something for Sip After Dark, by the way, or?
Stay tuned.
It's barely for Sip After Dark because it's that bad.
Yeah,
it's more like Adult Swim.
Yeah.
So That's a
But,
story for another time. Let's keep
but,
it PG.
Yeah, as of right now, 538 has this at 66% percentage for Cunningham. Um, most recent we have a Siena New York
Just to
Times.
confirm, real quick, Kylan, I'm sorry. This is the 60. When you say 66%, that's not the popular vote. That's just 538's.
That's just 538 statistical probability
Gotcha. Okay.
percent for Cal Cunningham. Some recent polling in the race: New York Times, Siena has him +4. Survey USA has him +10 for Cunningham. Monmouth +3 and Emerson +1. So we have a range from 1 to 10. But on average, it's been consistently averaging around between 4 and 6% for Cal Cunningham. And the most recent batch of polls after the sexting scandal does not seem to have damaged him any. I think this is a key Senate race as far as determining who's going to control the Senate. This is a purely bellwether Senate race. It's attracted lots of money. It's attracted lots of activity. It's attracted lots of air cover from both parties. But right now I think this race leans to Cal Cunningham. But as far as for the state, you guys take it away.
So
Okay. Sorry.
go ahead, Jules.
Well, I was going to say North Carolina is, again, one of those very, very close states. I think it's a little less close than the other ones we've rated as 50-50. I think it tilts a little more Democratic. It has in the past. So I think we can say that with the polling we're seeing now, we have a little bit more of an assurance that those polls could tilt more Democratic than not. The latest poll we have from Emerson is an even 0, +0 for either side. New York Times from October 9th to 13th is Biden +4. And we kind of have basically that for going several weeks back. So we have +5, +5, +3, +1. I think if we're adjusting for margin of error, we could probably safely say that Biden could potentially win by 1 or 2 points. I don't think it's safe them. I think it's probably tilt.
I would characterize it. Sorry, Tyler. I would characterize it as a tilt as well. Currently 538. The popular vote right now has Joe Biden at 50.9% and Donald Trump at 48.3%. So Joe Biden's got a pretty healthy 2.6 point lead in the popular vote right now. I don't think I'm ready to call this one a toss up like with Georgia, for example. I would call this one personally a tilt Democrat.
So I would personally say that this is tilting to the Democrats. I mean, it's crazy that we're talking about it like this. Jules, you said that North Carolina is definitely a more democratic state. As somebody that's lived there and experienced that state, I don't think that's a great characterization of it. Besides Obama winning it in 2008, North Carolina has not gone to any Democratic candidate since 1976 when Jimmy Carter won. So it is one of those states that is solidly, generally Republican because of demographic shifts and population gains in the Triad, the Triangle, and the Metro Atlanta area. So that's, for those that are not from North Carolina, that's Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point, that's Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, and the Charlotte metro area. Those are all places that have definitely grown and definitely changing the dynamics of how North Carolina's race is going. I would say it's tilt Democratic, because any Democrat that's going to win in that state right now has to have large leads nationally. The last person to do that was Obama. Joe Biden right now has his large lead, and I would say that would continue.
So, Tyler, do you think that that North Carolina is moving more towards a Democratic state of mind, or it's sort of always going to be?
I would say the population is dictating it to be more of a urban kind of a state than an urban and suburban, mostly suburban, frankly, which we all know the
Right.
suburbs are where everybody's battling for. So that's kind of the reason why I would say North Carolina is more like Florida in that it will be a battleground state from this
Yeah.
point forward. I wouldn't say it's leaning more toward Democrats or leaning more toward Republicans, but it was a solidly safe Republican state for generations at this point, and
Sure.
and it's definitely moved into more battleground territory.
What did Donald Trump win North Carolina by?
Donald Trump won North Carolina by I had it right here. He won it by 3.5 points, almost 4.
So
And
yeah.
Romney won it by 2. But
2.
that was after Obama, with his landslide victory in 2008, won it by a couple points, and he was the first Democratic candidate to win it in almost 40 years.
Wow.
Interesting information.
With
I'll
all
also-
that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Colin.
I'll go with tilt as well.
So
I was getting.
I
Yeah.
would say tilt.
Everyone can tell that's where I'm going to next. Yeah, I'm gonna call it a tilt as well. I think we can all agree there. So let's move it there. All right. I want to leave Ohio for last, actually. So let's go to Pennsylvania.
out of the 3 states, I would say this is the most likely Democratic state.
I agree.
The three meaning the ones we were just
We
talking
left
about.
last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of the last 3, I would agree.
Oh, okay,
I think Pennsylvania has moved in a large way towards Biden. If you look at the polls, if you look at the demographics, you look at everything in Pennsylvania is moving back towards the Democrats in a pretty significant way.
Yeah.
You've still got the Rust Belt sort of coal workers, and you've got a weird dichotomy in Pennsylvania. You've got the urban, like Philadelphia guys, and then you've got outside of that, you've got these old timey. Well, I don't mean to be disparaging, but you've got sort of a old style of living and miners and like steel workers and industry that went for Trump in 2016. And what Trump promised them in 2016 actually never came to fruition. So what I'm seeing in Pennsylvania is kind of a big break back to the Democrats, because I think they're seeing perhaps, I mean, their industry is not going to survive to a large degree, but maybe they're seeing a chance for something new, because the polling I'm seeing in Pennsylvania has broken pretty largely towards Joe Biden in a large way. And since we met last to do this, it's broken even further.
Yep.
So I don't see much of a chance of Pennsylvania going back to Donald Trump this year.
Well, it's not like it wasn't that Donald Trump did anything spectacular to win Pennsylvania. I think Hillary losing Pennsylvania had to do with her running the most inept campaign in modern Democratic history and not campaigning in the Rust Belt. I think it makes a hell of a difference
Agreed.
when you actively campaign in Pennsylvania and put up policies. And so I don't think it really had to do much with coal or things like that as far as industry. I think it just has to do with going back to the mean when you're able to put out an agenda that will help people and actually actively campaign and make your case. Pennsylvania has been reliably a Democratic state for 30 plus years until 2016. And so I just think it's going back to the mean. Now, granted, though, you have to compete because, to your point, Jules, there are, areas of rural Pennsylvania, that need to be competed against. There is a segment, in rural Pennsylvania and other rural parts of the countries, that may be more conservative and that have lost certain industries, but I think what Biden and I think what politicians need to do is to actually put out an agenda for rural America that can get them back in the game, whether that's with broadband, whether that's making sure that there's industry to have them be employed, to give them some semblance of economic mobility. People need to do that. And, what Trump did was he didn't really articulate any of those things, but he did talk a very good grievance game. We need to talk a game and be about a game that offers people upward mobility and actually hear what they have to say and try to empathize with what they're feeling. And Joe Biden did a good job of that in this campaign, particularly in his campaigning in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I agree. And Joe Biden's from Scranton. I think he has a much better like focus on that area, and I think people sympathize with him from that
I would
area
say,
too.
in a very short way of saying it, Joe Biden is doing better than Hillary Clinton in rural parts of Pennsylvania. Donald Trump won rural Pennsylvania because he spoke to coal miners, steel factory workers, manufacturing workers in the western parts of that state. That's what won him Ohio too.
Yep.
I would say it would break more evenly, and if it breaks more evenly, Joe Biden will win the state.
Yep. And just to break down how the popular vote looks right now, Joe Biden holds a very comfortable 6.1% lead in popular vote polling, and 538 rates his chances of winning the state as 87% at the moment. With all of that said, I would still characterize Pennsylvania as lean.
I would say lean.
I'd say likely.
I would also say likely.
Wow.
Ooh, we got our first tie. All right. Well, I'm going to break the tie. It's a lean.
that is fascism, actually, not democracy. I'm just gonna say that right now.
and as far as Ohio, when I like I said, I'm from West Virginia, and Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia. I'm very, in Kentucky even. I'm very familiar with those states. West Virginia was won by Donald Trump by almost, it was some ridiculous number, like 59 points in 2016. And right now, polling in West Virginia has him at only like a 24-point win, which is still huge. Don't get me wrong. And Democrats used to rely on West Virginia. West Virginia was one of those few reliably blue states, and now it's completely shifted the other way. But when you have those kinds of margins going one direction in that area where people have lost jobs, not only because of coal mines, there's only a handful of active mines between Pennsylvania and West Virginia right now. They've lost those jobs, the manufacturing jobs, the steel, the salt mines, all the chemical plants, all those things in those areas have been lost. They haven't been coming back. In Ohio, it's mostly been auto workers, building cars. Those jobs have been gone, and unfortunately, they're not coming back, or at least it's not looking that way. And the USMCA did not bring those jobs back. They did not help in making sure that those jobs come back. Those were campaign promises that Donald Trump had ran on. He has not delivered on those things, even in Ohio. And in Ohio, I think that those kinds of things, the suburbs, as we've mentioned before, those kind of dynamics are going to make this a tilt Democrat state.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the dynamic of that too is that he was kind of an unknown entity to a large degree. That he said, "I can do these things. I'm not part of the establishment. I'm gonna drain the swamp. Gonna do all this shit." And he didn't deliver on that because he actually turned out to be kind of inept as a politician. So I think people are seeing that. I think that's part of it.
And they are seeing that. And one of the reasons why I would categorize this as tilt Democrat instead of tilt Republican, because it's.
Oh, I think it's more
very,
tilt.
I would say it would be, in most scenarios, and I think even the last time we talked about this, I said that this was a tilt Republican state. The only reason why, or no, last time we said toss up, and the time before we said tilt Republican. The reason why I would say tilt Democratic this time is because of the national polling numbers have stayed true at high numbers.
To be clear,
I would say
we are talking about Ohio right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure. We didn't do like quite the segue that we've done in the past. So
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
We were so excited, we just jumped right into
Ohio because it all jumped right into Ohio.
Can I just say something right now? I appreciate your enthusiasm.
I agree with tilt Democratic in Ohio.
And the only reason why I say that is because of Biden's lead nationally is so insurmountable at this point, and Ohio is a bellwether state. It's chosen the nominee to win since 1960.
Yeah,
And I would
and
just
I
like
think Ohio also. Sorry, Colin. Excuse me.
Go ahead, Colin.
I was just going to say, the feedback that I had for Pennsylvania is the same that I have for Ohio. I think Joe Biden has run a very good Rust Belt campaign. Well, at least with Ohio came on late. Early on,
that's what I was going to say. I don't think
early on he didn't think he had a chance in Ohio. He only started turning it on until about 2 to 3 weeks ago. He finally started advertising. He finally started in-person canvassing to try to get out the vote operations. He was very late to the game. That being said, he's gone all in with advertising. He's gone all in with a robust get out the vote operation now in person, and it's actually moved the needle. And the fundamentals are starting to shift towards Biden. And so, I'll definitely agree with you guys on the tilt Democrat. If we can end election night with Biden taking Ohio, that will be an indicator of where the election is going to go. If he takes both Ohio and Florida, you can wrap a bow on it and call it a day.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, because there's no way Biden's not going to take the entire West Coast. If he has Ohio, he has Pennsylvania and Florida. Over.
Yeah.
Over.
I'm not willing to call it a tilt Democrat because I don't, based on the polling that I've seen, I don't believe it yet. In fact, 538 currently has it rated as a 51% chance of victory for Donald Trump, and the popular vote right now, less than 0.1 separates them. Yeah. So
looks like
I think as far as Pennsylvania goes, so goes Ohio to a large degree because they have very similar demographics. They have similar.
Ohio is further conservative.
Further conservative, for sure. But their industries are very similar. So, and as far as their union jobs, as far as what they do and what they produce in America, is similar.
But you would think at that point it would be similar to Michigan, and it's not. And that's
right.
The only
Michigan has Detroit.
The only reason why I even say that, because otherwise I would say it's toss up or lean Republican toward Donald Trump, is because of the national numbers. That's the only reason why I would even say that.
So real quickly then, to put a bow on this, let's do one last official vote on the last state of the night, Ohio, and we'll end it right there. What do you guys think?
Toss up.
I say toss up too.
Toss up.
Okay, so we all changed.
We all agree. Like I was like, I don't see how we could characterize it as tilt Democrat right now.
I think
if we're being totally fair about it, like yeah.
I think if we saw like Biden landslide, we're going to see Ohio go, we're going to see Georgia go, we're going to see, but that's scenario. But I think.
But even in the scenario
right
that we've come up with, he doesn't need it.
No, he doesn't need it.
Agreed.
Yep.
But
yeah.
Honestly, I'm ready for Ohio to stop being the deciding fucking factor.
No, but it's also it's a much more difficult path for Donald Trump to win.
Yep.
No matter what
happens, if he could win Wisconsin, he could win Michigan, but the way that the map is shaking out right now, he would then also have to defend Georgia, Florida, North Carolina as well.
Right.
And even Texas to a degree.
Biden has more paths.
Biden has a much larger path, a much more diverse path.
So
to
again,
victory.
With the way we have it, who cares about Iowa? Who cares about Ohio? Who cares about Georgia? Frankly, who cares about North Carolina, Florida?
Hey, I just want that fucking gravy, man.
I know you want the gravy, but I'm just saying.
And can I say, like, I mean, as unbiased as we try to be during these podcasts that we do, I personally would love to see a Joe Biden blowout, because then that leaves no doubt in anybody's mind. And I mean, based on the polling we're seeing, that is a very likely scenario at this point. But the one thing I'd like to say to everybody watching right now is campaign like you're 10 points behind.
Yep.
Vote like you're 10 points behind,
Mhm.
because frankly, nothing's in the bag until this election is over and the results are certified. And that's the
Vote
last thing I want to say on that.
Vote,
Well,
vote, vote.
Vote
It
early.
doesn't matter who you're voting for. And I'm going to say this again. I've said it in the last
Yep.
2 podcasts that we had. Doesn't matter who you're voting for. Just go out there, research the candidates that you have available, and vote for whomever follows your beliefs. Doesn't matter who it is, because you cannot, in this time that we're in, say that it's okay to not do your civic duty and vote.
Yes.
60% of us did it in 2016, and we have 40% of people that are still complaining with the other 60% that actually did vote. So if you don't vote, you're saying you don't have a voice, and
Yes.
you can't say that your voice does not make a difference, because literally 40,000 votes was the difference in the
If
2016.
you hate what's going on, vote, and then you can argue and complain, and nobody can say "fuck you, you didn't vote."
Like we do.
Like we do.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's where I'd like to end tonight's broadcast. I'd like to quickly thank everybody so much for watching tonight. It's been a real treat getting to go through this map with all of you tonight. Real quick, I'd also like to point out we have another. This is kind of strange because we don't normally do this, but we have another episode tomorrow. And this episode is going to be going into California's ballot initiatives. And we're really excited for that one because personally, I haven't researched all the propositions. I'm going to be watching as a spectator, so I have a better idea of how I'm going to fill out my mail-in ballot when I send it in. So I'd like to encourage all of you guys to watch tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, and it should be a great one. So with that, I want to end it right there. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.